Welcome to the Influential Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Duncan, and my dream is to inspire moms to pursue their goals and help them make a difference in their world. I'm a mom of 2 young boys, a wife to my high school sweetheart, and a lawyer. This show is a place to hear stories of moms working hard to have a positive influence in their profession or their community, and sometimes both, even as they juggle their responsibilities at work, at home, and to their children. You'll get tangible, practical tips for managing the chaotic world of motherhood and work. Come along as we hear these stories and feel inspired to step outside of our comfort zone as leaders and as a positive force within our communities. I believe that moms can change the world. On today's episode of Influential Motherhood, I am chatting with Amy Williams, and Amy is a mom of 3 girls, 1 who grew in her heart and 2 in her belly, and the 3rd was just born in the last few months, so she definitely has her hands full of love and has been great to talk with me today. Thank you, Amy, for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Amy is the founder of the Custom Made Kid Foundation and wrote a book called Custom Made Kid as part of this nonprofit that she has started. And so we're going to hear Amy talk today about her story of I suspect infertility and faith and adoption, and then the births of her 2 girls, and just her vision for what Custom Made Kid Foundation is going to do and has been doing for families who are looking to adopt. So I think that probably the best place to start, Amy, is for you to tell us more about you and who you are, because I like to get to know our guests first and then to hear the story that we're kind of here to talk about. So tell us a little bit more about you and kind of what gets you up in the morning, what you love, a few things that we might be interested in.
Sure, absolutely. So, like Melissa said, my name is Amy Williams, and I am the founder of the Custom Made Kid Foundation. But I think all of us have this identity that really leads our story. And for me, mine is related to adoption, and then obviously the 3 girls that Melissa mentioned earlier. They are my reason for getting up in the morning. I have a wonderful husband and great children, and then this foundation, the ability to help grow families, which I'm sure we'll talk about more. It just really fires me up. So that's one of my great loves and passions, and I'm excited to talk about it.
That's awesome. And so now you live in, is it Alabama? Arkansas?
Yes, Birmingham, Alabama.
Alabama. That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And have you lived in Alabama your whole life? Is that where you were born and raised?
So interestingly, I was born in Alabama, yes, but I was a military brat. So when people ask me where I'm from, I don't exactly know how to answer that question.
All over.
Right, all over. But I did find my way back to Alabama, and you're going to have to bomb me out. I love it here.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so good. And you get to raise your family there in Alabama where you love it. So that's good. So can you talk a little bit about what you've done professionally in, just professional work? Because I'm sure that, that might play a part into you starting your nonprofit. But tell us about what you've done as, a paycheck kind of job
Sure.
over the years.
What's my day job?
Yeah, what's your day job?
Absolutely. So coming out of college, I actually ran a fitness center at a country club. I was their athletic director, spent several years doing that, personal training, because it kind of included all of the elements that I loved, which was sort of leadership and teaching and health, and it just hit on all cylinders of the things that I really liked. And for a long time, that was something that I did and enjoyed. And then a few years ago, I think 5 years ago now, somebody reached out to me about a position in the technology world. So basically, in a joking way, I tell people I serve as a translator on behalf of tech people.
Okay.
Because, technical people can get a little bit jargony. And so I actually work with an organization that helps with cybersecurity. And so I'm in the cybersecurity role where I'll go to CFOs and CEOs and talk to them about, hey, cybersecurity is huge. I'm sure it's on your radar. Here are
Mm-hmm.
some of the ways that we can help you, or tell me what your pain points are, and I'm happy to connect you with resources that can
Oh,
help you.
wow. Well, that
So
sounds fancy.
well, it's a
And
good industry to be in because
yeah.
everybody's aware right now of the security issues and components that have to go into technology. So I love it, but I get to speak normal on behalf of tech geeks is
Yeah,
kind of the way
that's
I joke.
cool.
Yeah.
So, are you still doing any of the personal training type of work? And if not, do you miss it?
Only for myself.
Okay. Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
miss that coaching piece that you were doing?
In a way, the job that I have now really includes those elements. I
Yeah.
get to talk to people about what are your needs, what are your struggle, what are your goals,
Mm-hmm.
and how can I help you get there incrementally. So it takes the components of what I loved about the health and fitness industry and put them in a more professional environment, I guess you could
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And so I still get those benefits. And then, interestingly enough, I feel like this particular job has queued up a lot of the resources that have equipped me to do what I wanted to do and what I'm wanting to do with my kind of personal passion, which is
Yeah.
the Custom Made Kid Foundation related to adoption, and just connecting me to resources in general
Yeah.
that have kind of come alongside me and said, hey, I know somebody you should meet, or so I can definitely see how kind of why God steered me into this role, because it's actually opened the door for a lot of what he's wanted me to do on my own personal side. So it's been a
Yeah.
neat overlap, and the company's really come alongside me and allowed me to pursue my dreams along with working a real day job, if you want to
That
call
is
it that.
awesome. That is
Mm-hmm.
awesome. To find a company that supports your dreams and your family. I mean, those are, that's the perfect trio of, I think a good balance and what someone would want from a company to work for. So that's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. It brings a lot of loyalty to the situation. I'll say
Yeah,
that for
for
sure.
sure. So let's talk about your adoption story. And I think we connected in the great wide world of the internet many, many years ago. So I feel like I've seen it from the beginning. And so I feel like I know it because I've watched it in real time. But
Mm-hmm.
for those who might not be familiar, take us back and introduce us to your adoption story so that we can then understand the importance of Custom Made Kid Foundation.
Sure, absolutely. So back when you would say a blog and people would go, huh?
Yeah.
I kind of started writing for myself mostly, and I thought my mom might read it, my best friend might read it, and then one day a comment came through from somebody I didn't know, and I was like, "Whoa, that's
Mm-hmm.
strange." And then as the kind of blogging world evolved, it was a awesome way to connect to other people who had similar stories and also very different stories, and it just really was a neat community. And like you said, you are able to follow along with people's stories and get very invested. um, but that blog that I started writing back then, at first it was just sort of, hey, went to a movie this weekend, here's a picture of me out front,
Yeah.
and then evolved more and more into telling personal details about my life and my journey. And one of the components of that was a pretty tough time of infertility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like it was just a super safe space. So I wouldn't say I'm as transparent in person as I was on that blog, but it just
Mm-hmm.
sort of felt like, hey, I can say whatever I want to say, and people can hit the X button in that corner if they don't want to hear it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of
So it was
like walking away from you in person.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I started talking a lot about infertility and the journey through that, and all of the things that go into infertility, treatments and struggles, and that faith. If you have a Christian faith or any sort of belief system, how it challenges that belief system,
Mm-hmm.
or how it challenges friendships and marriages and those kind of things. So I talked pretty openly about it, and I think maybe that's why people read, because there can be this feeling of with infertility that I'm alone and nobody
Yeah.
gets it. And so I just sort of thought, you know what, what do I have to lose here? And I talked about infertility a lot. I talked about my faith a lot. I feel like one day I was up and one day I was down, and I think
Mm-hmm.
people identified with that because infertility is hard, in general. I
Yeah.
mean, hour by hour, it could be different.
Yeah.
But on that blog, because I was talking about infertility, I did get some feedback from the audience and family and friends in person. Why don't you consider adoption? Like, you're struggling, you're hurting, you clearly want to be a mom. Why wouldn't you consider adoption? Which is a valid question.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't one I was ready to consider. And I kind of jokingly say to people, I don't know if I thought my ovaries were going to spontaneously combust if I said yes to adoption or what. But really, it was probably more of a if God calls me to this, and if I say yes, then it means that I'm never going to experience this other side of motherhood, which was biology. And I
Mm-hmm.
just had a hard time getting there. So
Yeah.
I said on that blog, if God's ever going to call me to adoption, he's going to have to drop a baby in my lap.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was almost like this begging God to do something crazy. But that did happen.
I want to go back real quickly before we go any further. Where do you think that came from? That fear that if you said yes to adoption, you would essentially be like locking the doors to your ovaries or becoming
Right.
a biological mom. Like where do you think that came from?
I don't know that it was ever, there was like this defining moment that made me
Mm-hmm.
worry about it. But I think, as women, we kind of have this concept of what our life might look like or should look like, or
Yeah.
we have this community around us that everyone's life looks like X kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't a part of my growing up story, really. I mean, I
Yeah.
think one or two in the process of ever doing that. And then also, to some degree, yourself. And I
Right.
had to kind of come to the point where I had to acknowledge that I was afraid that that was for better people than I. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what if that kid didn't love me? There was a fear there. What if I didn't
Yeah.
love them? What if I'm a terrible person deep down inside? I mean, I
Yeah.
just had all this. But at the end of the day, I would have to say that that maturing process didn't happen until it was supposed to happen,
Yeah.
because I've said it before, there was a little girl at a certain time in history that was meant to be mine.
Yep.
And had I gotten ready any sooner, it wouldn't have been her. And had I
Yeah.
gotten ready any later, it wouldn't have been her. So the
Yeah.
story happened exactly like it was supposed to, but it's unfortunate that I didn't get it better beforehand.
Yeah. Well, but like you said, I mean, that's part of the story of custom made kids. So, I mean, it all it
True.
all ties together. Okay, so we'll pick up back where we left off. God dropped a baby in your lap. So keep take us from there.
Sure. So, a reader out in Texas who I'd actually gone to high school with briefly, like I said, I was a military brat, moved around all the time. And my parents had said we were in Birmingham long term for good, put down some roots. And I had done so. So, it was pretty traumatic when they came back to me and said, look, life is just life, and you can't bet on anything really. We're going to make one more move. So we actually made one more move out to Texas, and at the same time, this other girl moved into the school that I did, and that our paths overlapped then. And it wasn't until at the time, I guess 16 years later, that
Hmm.
our paths came back together, which was she was reading my blog, knew about the infertility struggle, and kind of in her own mind said, if I ever run across a child that needs a family, I know who.
Oh,
And
wow.
that ended up being me. So I got that
Yeah.
call one day that said, I would like for you to consider this. And I said, okay,
Hmm.
I'll consider it, but I'm pretty sure my answer is no. And that kind of started the journey. And then, ironically, 15 days later, I was actually a mom.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about those 15 days. What was going on in your heart and in your conversations with God? And what challenges were you going through during those 15 days?
Sure. So I feel like every mom, whether they know it or not, or believe it or not, has kind of a scrapper component to them. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to balance things as a mom, and then as a working professional, and a stay-at-home mom. That's a lot of balancing things.
Yeah.
So whatever your role is. And so I kind of kicked into that gear, I guess you could say. Like, whenever I found out about this little maybe baby, and the decision was made that that was going to be my future, then I just sort of went through it like okay, we're doing this, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after the fact that I actually think it all kind of hit like, whoa, I'm a mom now.
Yeah.
Um, but I just went into that mode. And that's a good place to be. You get a lot accomplished
Mhm.
there,
Yeah.
but there's also this other side of it where you have to sit back and go, okay, wow, now let's talk about what this looks like, or,
Yeah.
let's get real here kind of deal. So,
So how did God change your heart during that? I mean, you kind of went from, I don't think that this is what I'm called to do to, baby dropped in my
okay.
lap kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, here I go.
It's a big leap. Yeah, I would agree. So my situation was I always had a desire to kind of follow whatever path God had to me. It doesn't mean that I didn't get in my own way quite a
Right.
few times. So after I met her, she was all of the things that I was afraid of relative to adoption. There were noted attachment issues. She had physical delays. Um, Seemed to have some emotional delays. They told me that, they had just done a hearing test to see if she could actually hear. They were going to do a vision test to see if she could actually see, because there were all these questions about her health. And,
Mhm.
so I go out there, and the very things that I feared were staring me in the face.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to meet her, and then I really just had a reckoning that night in the hotel. I mean, it was one of those, I went back to the hotel room. I was thinking about this little girl and the future and what that might look like. And I just had this kind of emotional breakdown in some ways. I mean, to say I ugly cried is putting it nicely. Um, but I also, God has a way of equipping you when He calls you to something.
Yeah.
And so I sat there in that hotel room, and I think for the first time I ever really understood salvation.
Mhm.
And it was because of this little girl who I wanted to meet and have the heavens open up and angels sing, and, a beam of light fell on both of us, and it was that clear. And it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
Instead, I realized exactly what God did for us, which was He didn't look at me and think, oh, she's so perfect, I have to have her.
Yeah.
Or she has all these things that she can bring to me. I need that as a part of my life. Instead, it was the reverse, which is I look at her and I know she needs me, and I'm willing to do this. I have things that I can provide to her.
Yeah.
And so there was this huge moment where I realized, wow, that's what He did for me. So,
Yeah.
how could I not do that for someone else? And that was one part of it. And then also, at the time, about an old Bible story that I'd just known my entire life of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham and Sarah, it took forever for God
Mhm.
to kind of follow through on this promise. And here they are over 100, and then He comes through. And then they get this beautiful gift, and God says, now give it back to me. I want you to sacrifice
Mhm.
Isaac. And Abraham just does it with obedience. And I remember thinking, like, okay, God, I see what you're doing here. You want my blank check. You want
Yeah.
me to just be willing to say yes. And that's scary.
Yeah.
But if I trusted Him the way I said I trusted Him, then what other choice did I have? So
Right.
there was a lot of growing up to do in those moments for me spiritually that
Mhm.
made me just say, okay, I trust you. Like, I don't get it, but I trust you. And then
Yeah.
now I look back and I just shake in my boots thinking, like, what if I had missed it?
Yeah.
Like, what if I
Yeah.
had not?
Yeah,
So,
because she really is such a custom made kid for you. So tell us about her, um, you know, uh, I guess the way she has just excelled, I think, with you as her mom. I think, I've been able to watch that over the years. So tell us a little bit, because we've heard about the challenges that she had
sure.
then, but there's a lot of remarkable things that have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I think love does a lot of great things.
Mm-hmm.
So does great nutrition and boundaries and all of those things. So I actually kind of paused on my professional career. I mean, I kept working, but not to the degree that I am now.
Yeah.
Um, and really went back through all of the attachment theory things that they talk about with adoption. Just really started over with her, because she was 12
Mm-hmm.
weeks when basically she became my child, and we were still going through the adoption process. But I started over. I did skin to skin at 12 weeks, and she could
Mm-hmm.
hold her own bottle by 12 weeks just out of necessity. And I kind of took that away from her because I wanted her to learn to trust me.
Yeah.
And I mean, it hasn't been a perfect process. I tell people all the time, you have to have grace because, I have experienced both adoption and biology now.
Mm-hmm.
And she has two younger biological sisters, back to back sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, you have 9 months to get to know this person
Yeah.
and to think about them and dream about them and, have ideas and plan. And here I was meeting this person 15 days later, a mom. They were a stranger to me. I was a stranger to them, and here we are getting to know each other. And so I chose to love her right away, but the feelings followed later. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that maybe other people have the experience where it's immediate, but for me it was a time thing.
Yeah.
And for her it was a time thing.
Yeah.
But, the first time I ever changed her diaper, I just cried my eyes out because I had taken this little girl who's now mine, and I'm driving back from Texas, one part of Texas to a different part of Texas where my parents lived, thankfully, because I had to stay there for quite a while until we got some clearances state to state. And when I first changed her diaper, she has a birthmark in the exact same place on her inner thigh that I do. Same
Mm-hmm.
shape, same color,
That's
opposite legs, so almost like a
amazing.
mirror image. And I remember thinking, okay, God, you are freaking me out. But it was just such a cool, like, kind of almost the signature on a masterpiece, a beautiful
Yeah.
painting, and God puts a signature on it kind of deal. So it was just a very confirming thing. And I didn't even see that until after she was already in my arms as my kid.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of moments where he just really showed up for me to confirm the decision. And she's 7 now. I mean, she thinks she's 37. She's brilliant.
She's
I
so
mean,
cute.
she's phenomenal. And then she has a lot of buy-in on her little sisters because I don't know if, I mean, we may talk about this later, but she basically said, Mom, when are you going to get a baby in your tummy? And I said, well, I'm not. My tummy's broken. You grew in my
Mm-hmm.
heart for a reason. And I said, maybe we'll have another baby that grew in my heart. And she goes, no, I want a baby that grew in your tummy, and I want it to be a sister. I'm going to pray about that. And now she has two little biological sisters. So maybe her prayers are better than mine. I don't know.
Wow, she's got some powerful prayers. So,
Yes, she does.
walk us through that now. So, you didn't anticipate that you would have any biological children, but you do.
Never.
You have two. So, can
Sure.
you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, I always say this: God is the God of details, and part of those details is his timing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm married to a wonderful man now. He loves Landry like his own, and we have two biological children together. And she feels like so much ownership about those two little girls, which is
Mm-hmm.
neat. She'll tell people, and we started kind of practicing the process when I was due with my first of these two babies, and saying, one time I kind of joked with her and I said, so you grew in my heart and Dawson, her baby sister, grew in my tummy. Like, who do you think I love more? And no question, she was like, me. And I said, nope. And she goes, oh, Dawson? Like,
Yeah.
her? And I said, nope. And you could see the confusion cross her face. And she was like, well, who? And I said, it's the same love. You guys just
Yeah.
grew in different places. Well, she grabbed onto that. And, so she tells people all the time, yeah, she grew in my mom's tummy, and so did Witten, the other baby sister. And she was like, and I grew in my mom's heart. And now her big thing is she wants us to adopt a baby boy
Oh
that grew
gosh.
in the heart. Yeah, she's like, you need two and two. And we're like, hold it, sister. You need, give us a minute. So,
She's gonna start praying about that, and who knows what'll
yeah.
happen, right? So
Yeah,
you
I'm
you
like,
might get another phone call.
yeah, absolutely. I'm like, hold. I don't need one right now. So
That's so
anyway, but
funny.
Matt always laughs, and my husband always laughs and says, "Oh, this is so happening, isn't it?" And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Give me a minute. So,
Yeah,
but it's
because your
definitely,
littlest is just a few, like, couple months, right?
yeah. She's
Yeah.
9 weeks,
9
so
weeks.
it's,
Okay. Yeah. Even
yeah.
smaller than I thought. So how has I guess what unexpected challenges did you face in your heart as you were finally pregnant? something that you had dreamed of. Were there any kind of internal challenges in that when you found out?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you
Or if
have,
not, that's, I mean, there don't have to
yeah,
be, but
no, agreed. There were just fear,
yeah.
really.
Yeah.
That's my old friend, fear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my fear was that Landry would in some way feel lesser at some
Yeah.
point in her life because of this biological component. And it couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
And so I really had to come center and say, look, I know what the truth is,
Right.
and I'm going to teach her accordingly and treat her accordingly, that she's an equal heir kind of deal,
Yeah.
and just trust that that will settle in her heart. And
Yeah.
at this point in her life, at 7, and because of how transparent we've been about the adoption and how much we've said, you are our custom made kid, which kind of
Mm-hmm.
leads into this other component of my life. Um, that was what the whole book that I wrote, and then the foundation, which there's a two-part to that, so I'll
Yeah.
explain it. But basically, it kind of kept me up at night at first when she
Yeah.
first came home. Like, how do you tell a child that they're adopted and not minimize their value in any way, or even elevate their value in any way over other
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
And but I wanted her to have this really grounded understanding of adoption and her story and how beautiful I thought it was. And so I sat down one night and wrote a kind of, cute little kids book about this adoption story after I had searched and searched for one that really, that I thought would answer the questions that she might have, and I just couldn't find it. And it's not that there aren't any good adoption books out there. It just didn't really hit on what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, well, I'll write my own.
So when you sat
So
down to do that, did it just, I mean, it just kind of poured out of you? And,
it
when you
did.
sat down to do it? Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of shocked myself. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just one of those things where I thought, how in the world do I tell her? And it kept me up so many nights. Then one night I woke up and it just spilled out. Now, the actual evolution of the book, or whatever you want to say, has taken
Mm-hmm.
forever. So that wasn't easy. Finding out how to self-publish, or
Yeah.
do you shop it to publishers, and how do you even get anyone to pay attention to you? And it's a children's book, so it needs illustrations. I mean, there's just all these components to it. And here I am, full-time mom, full-time worker elsewhere,
Yeah.
and then also trying to do this book. And then how do you have a 501c3, or how do you become a 501c3 if you have a foundation? And I think every business or nonprofit or whatever you are has a growth cycle, and a lot
Yeah.
of like, what now,
Yeah.
and
What's the
I
next
was
step kind of
right.
questions? Yeah. Hey friends, popping into this fun episode to remind you to take a quick second to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. And don't forget, you can also sign up for bonus episodes and content from my monthly newsletter at melissaduncan.com/join. Thanks for listening, and let's get back to the show. So when
Yeah.
you sat down to write the book, did you have a vision for the nonprofit, or were you just, it was just kind of thinking about the book?
So it
Like
all really goes,
independently.
yeah. Well, it also kind of came from when I started thinking about the book and what I wanted to do with it, and then how not open to adoption I had been
Mm-hmm.
initially because of my really just not a lack of understanding about adoption, and a lack of connection to it initially. And now it's like I can't stop talking about it, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't love it enough, or however you want to say it. But I wrote the book, and I just felt so strongly that it was more than our story,
Mm-hmm.
and because it just really did speak to what I feel like adoption is, or any relationship with a child. Every child's
Yeah.
identity is that God chose them, created them, chose the right family. There are no mistakes. And that's a big part of the book, is that every part of their story is custom made, and
Mm-hmm.
every part of them is custom made. There are no accidents. And it says in the book, sometimes a kid grows in a mommy's tummy, sometimes a kid grows in a mommy's heart. But essentially that they were loved right from the start. It doesn't matter how they got there.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, well, I was such a jerk. Like, I am writing this adoption book and asking God to bless it, and I didn't even want this in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so I kind of thought of tithing from it, like, Lord, I wouldn't even have this idea if it weren't for you. And I started with that sort of general 10% that churches talk about sometimes
Yep.
about giving back. And then I was like, okay, I owe you double. So I said, I'm going to give 20% of all the proceeds from this custom made kid book about adoption to a foundation that helps other families adopt. Because, not only is there the emotional component of adoption
Mm-hmm.
and where with pregnancy, at least you kind of get a choice on the timing,
Right.
usually, or you get to say, okay, this is when I want to do it, or this is when I don't want to do it, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Or
And
even
that
if it's
doesn't,
not, you have 9 or 10 months,
yeah,
10
yeah,
months to
exactly.
prepare.
You have a little ramp up
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
With adoption, one of the hard things is when you make the choice, you're going, okay, I'm changing my life forever. Today's the
Yep.
day, and that's big,
Yeah.
no matter who you are. And then the other aspect is the financial component. I mean, it is not a lot of people have just sort of a spare, whatever, $25,000 laying around
Just hanging
kind of deal.
around, waiting to be
Right.
spent. Yeah.
Exactly. On top of the normal day-to-day expenses of raising a child. So, when the adoption came up and I started thinking, okay, look, I've got a child out in Texas that I'm going to adopt, and then I've got so I've got legal fees in 2 states.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't leave one state to go back to the state you actually live in until you get permission. Otherwise, it's considered kidnapping, which I didn't want to be a part
Yeah.
of, you know.
That's a
And so
whole
you
different set of
have
problems that you don't want.
right. Right. And, you don't have to think about that if it's your biological child, but you may be out in another state for a significant amount of time. And that's, out of work money. That's
Yeah.
expenses of living while you're gone, those kind of things. And so my thought was I wanted to partner in some way with a group that helped couples with the financial component because I did not want anyone missing what I ended up being blessed with because of that.
Yeah.
There may be other reasons to say this isn't for me, and
Mm-hmm.
that's for each person to kind of walk out.
Right.
But the financial component, I mean, the thought of if I had walked away because of the money, but what it would have cost me, that just ate at me. It still eats at me. So I
Yeah.
ended up thinking, because I don't know, I'm crazy or something. I ended up thinking, well, why can't I create a foundation?
I love
um,
it. I love it.
and so the book actually feeds into the foundation, the 20% that I talked about. So we kind
Mm-hmm.
of joke and say for every book that's bought, another family story is written
Yeah. I
because
love
some of the
that.
funds go over there into the foundation. Well, then the foundation also has these shirts. They're just, comfortable little shirts with our logo on it, but they're shirts that people can use to fundraise. So instead of saying, hey, just give me money, because
Mm-hmm.
that was, I mean, I about choke on asking for help. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things I have to get better at and have gotten better at, but want to help other people be good at. If you can give somebody a shirt and charge $25 and $20 of it goes to your adoption, then great. So basically, anything above my cost on the shirts, couples can sell the shirts, and the money goes straight to their adoption. So there's
Oh, that's
a
awesome.
component where, yeah, the book helps, the T-shirts help, and then we have charitable givers also that give to the foundation regularly, so that we can have couples apply for grants. Like, hey, we need a home study now because there's a baby waiting for us, and it's $2,500 or $4,000, and we don't have that laying around for that at this moment.
Yeah.
Then we can help partner with them to get that done. So it's just really a way to come alongside adopting families and say, hey, we see you.
That is amazing. So, how long has the foundation been in place? A few years, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I'm thinking like
3 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
probably 3 or 4 years now that I'd have to look back with the foundation, but really the whole concept started in 2012 when
Okay.
I
Yeah.
adopted Landry, and
Yeah.
it's just grown baby step at a time. And that's one thing, sometimes you think, oh, you're just going to fall into success if you
Mm-hmm.
want it bad enough. And if you put in the legwork, it's just going to happen. And sometimes that's not true. Sometimes it's just a
Yeah.
whole lot of baby steps stringing together. And, I'm still just baby stepping through the process. What next,
Yeah.
kind of deal. And as long as I keep moving, I consider that a success.
Yeah, I was going to say, if those little baby steps, as long as they're baby steps forward, then you're moving in the right direction. And
Sure.
it doesn't have to be these, gigantic leaps and bounds. And I think for most people and what they're, trying to do, it's not huge leaps and bounds. I think most things that you see that we would collectively, not just you and me, but we as a society would say, oh, that's a success,
Mm-hmm.
was probably mostly baby steps and maybe a few giant leaps at the end,
Yeah,
that they got
absolutely. Just
kind
gained a
of,
little momentum.
yeah, like they got a little momentum or a big push, but I think I wouldn't discount your progress because it's baby steps. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where people, may struggle is I've had people say to me, "Oh my gosh, I could have never done this." Well, yeah, you could.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, that's the wonderful thing about a passion or a dream
yeah,
is that it gets a hold of you and you just keep moving forward and, you know, like you said, as long as those baby steps are forward, it's great, but I've had a couple backwards too
mm-hmm,
and, had to sit down and say, "Okay, now
yeah,
which direction kind of deal."
yeah.
But then I'm glad for those because I ended up in a better place than I would have been had it gone exactly according to plan.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to look at the net, like
Hmm.
if you take, 5 steps forward and 2 steps back, you've still gone forward. So, I think looking at the net is important. What is your hope for at this point, in kind of your journey and where you are and in your story? What's your hope for the foundation and for the book?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Um, the book obviously has value. Like I love it that it was Landry's story and that it's kind of it's been built upon.
Mhm.
And, more than anything, I decided a long time ago that if one kid read that book and it grounded them and gave them identity in Christ or it took away a hurt or whatever, that was a success for me.
Yeah.
So I kind of was like, look, this is a hobby. Just think of it like that, and then the pressure's off. And as far as the foundation goes, I just, every family that somehow we're able to contribute to, the thought of the basically it exponentially goes out. We're creating legacy,
Yeah.
because if you help a family and a child comes into that family and then they have children and it's kind of this ripple effect that I love that the Custom Made Kid Foundation can be a part of.
Yeah.
And so I have great and grand dreams of it. I would love for us to be able to help a lot of families, but I
Mhm.
have to also keep in mind that, those roots that one at a time,
Yep.
be okay with that. So I do have big dreams for Custom Made Kid to be a book that people, when the word adoption comes up, they say, "Oh my goodness, I've got a book that you've got to read,"
Yeah.
kind of thing. I would love to see it kind of be one of those defining books. And then because that is the case, then the foundation will grow. And then I would love to have businesses say, "Hey, we want to partner with you," or families who have benefited from adoption or touched by adoption, that kind of thing, that
Mhm.
they would partner. So, I have big dreams for it, but just baby steps. I'm going to focus on those.
Yeah. That's right. One foot in front of the other.
Hmm.
What do you want your legacy to be for your girls?
I that is a daily prayer,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
I have three girls that I think I am the example here. I
Mhm.
mean, I want them to be, I am a working mom, and sometimes I feel guilty about that. And I think
Mhm.
working moms tend to feel guilty about that because it's a hard balance to do. And I'm sure there's other roles that are just as tough.
Yeah.
But I also want them to be proud of their mom too, that I
Yep.
pursued my passions and that if I had to say to them, I've got to do this and I'm intentional in the other times that I'm with them, then that's better for me than being there 24/7 and not really valuing the time that I have
Yep.
with them or being intentional.
100%.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
so
agree with that.
Yeah, I just have to give myself grace that I'm not going to be the perfect mom every day, and sometimes I have to choose, the dream.
Yep.
And as long as they know I love them and the foundation's there, and I give them something to be proud of, I hope that covers a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Well, I think you're doing it. So, you
well,
know,
thank you.
I like to kind of end with a very practical tip for moms because well, part of this podcast is sharing stories, but also leaving moms with a practical tip if maybe writing a book or starting a nonprofit is something that they are interested in. So, is there maybe one thing or one tip that you might say that you learned in this process of creating the custom made kid foundation and book that you could pass along to other moms who might have a similar vision as far as, a nonprofit or a book or both?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier, it's hard for me to ask for help
Mm-hmm.
or accept help. And, I don't think you get anywhere good alone, really. Like if you put
Yeah.
yourself, people get tired when they're alone or they get defeated and those kind of things. And so one of the things that I feel like I've learned in this process is there are people out there with knowledge that have been where you've been or have gone where you want to go. And so I've had to learn how to ask. And I've also had to learn how to just sort of openly share my story unapologetically.
Yep.
And if people get tired of it, okay,
Yeah.
but this is my dream and my passion. And so um, the more you're willing to kind of put your heart out there on your sleeve, it's shocking how many people say, "Hey, I know someone you need to meet," or
Yeah.
"I know someone who has something like this. You should talk to them." And I can't tell you how many times my next step has come like a door has opened that I couldn't have even ever imagined
Yeah.
opening. And so, from a practical standpoint, I think just if it's your dream, talk about it to whoever will listen,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
be mindful of your audience. Take the social cues if they're not
Right.
interested, be quiet. But at the same time, don't be afraid to share your dream because that is a way that other people can partner with you in your dream and help move you forward.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a great tip. I love it.
Well,
And
thank you.
applicable to so many different things that, moms might be trying to do. So thanks for
Sure.
that, Amy.
Well,
So
thank you.
thanks for sharing your story. And as we wrap up, tell people where they can actually go online to learn more about the foundation and buy the book and the shirts and maybe follow your story on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a Facebook page and an Instagram that are both under the Custom Made Kid name. And so it's pretty easy to find. The website is custommadekid.com. And that actually has a link to everything. So there's
Perfect.
a video that kind of sums up our story. And if you're interested in seeing Landry and our family, we're all in the video. So it kind of talks about the journey and what we want from it. And then the shirts are available there, the book's available there, and then more information about the foundation as well.
Wonderful. Well, I pray that this will give you maybe two more steps forward and that, um, you know, as you continue to pour your your love into this, because I know that's where it's coming from, in your heart, that this will just continue to become a snowball that will help lots and lots of families, because I know that that's the goal. So,
It is. Thank
yeah,
you. I
yeah,
appreciate that.
absolutely. Thanks so much, Amy, for sharing your story.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for tuning in for another inspiring episode of the Influential Motherhood podcast. Be sure to follow my own journey in motherhood and work at Melissa Duncan JD on Instagram, and follow the behind the scenes of the podcast at Influential Motherhood on Instagram and Facebook. If you're enjoying the Influential Motherhood podcast, please take a second to leave a rating or review in iTunes. It is how you can help other moms find the show so they can be inspired by these stories. See you next week.